Hey everybody, it's good to see you back again. Well, we're starting the D2 crankcase guard work. You can see I've been doing a little bit of work underneath the chassis, and I cleaned up that bracket, that mounting bracket we took off of the 5U parts machine, and I've got it installed on the bottom of 5J1113. Those brackets were pretty much all the same, highly interchangeable, so that's not a big deal at all right there. And yeah, we've been making some marks on the steel. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, we needed to figure out the dimensions of this crankcase guard. We'll just call it a belly pan because that's what sticks in my head. And yeah, that one out there off the beer can D2 is pretty beat up. The nice part though about the Caterpillar parts manuals is that all their illustrations are drawn to scale, okay? And they're technically accurate as well. So what I do is I just, I'll scan like, a spread like that, and I have something I can write on and mark on, and you can see I've went and like extended angle lines. Then you can use a protractor on there, figure out exactly what all the bend angles are. We're looking at 20 degrees on the front. We had a 19-degree kick up on the back. I checked some of these other ones too. They were all the same. We'll just go straight 20 on everything because that's a lot easier to keep everything in perspective. But when you're starting out with something like this to use as a pattern, and I had it all set and ready, but it rained last night, so you'll just have to forgive the water in here. But yeah, this thing has been beat up and tweaked and bent and welded and hammered and everything else. So sometimes, measuring straight dimensions off of this is going to get a little bit fuzzy, but we can pick items that are for the most part still intact, like, well, the profile of that upper edge of that front mounting bracket. That's 4 3/4 inches. So we know that. We have another pretty good spot back here from where it kicks up. They had a little weld line right there, and we know that is 6-inch distance right there. So we take those two measurements and then apply them to the scans right off the parts manual. So we know we're 4 3/4 in the illustration there. We know that we're 6 inches in the illustration there. So we can take the distance of that line, we know that's 6 inches, and then just correspond that to all the other features and contours and shapes and bends and everything, and get a pretty good idea exactly what all of our distances are on a piece that has not yet been, bent up and beat out of shape. So that's a pretty good tool, and it's a really nice thing that CAT draws all these illustrations to scale. That really does help a lot. So you can take the measurements that you determine from knowing, those set distances via the diagram, and then go out and then compare them against that bent up piece that's out there, and then all of a sudden things start making a lot more sense. You start seeing what's supposed to be there, what's not, and you can pretty much verify everything using that procedure. So the next thing we need to determine is how to best utilize the material that we have for making this piece. We have this 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of 1/4 inch thick steel, and we don't have any, press brakes, anything like that. We're doing all this stuff the hard way, all right? We're undercapitalized and overly ambitious. So it's the best way I can put it. So yeah, you can see I've got a square marked out on there. That's going to be my rough blank for basically the entire body of that belly pan. And we have a lot of leftover material, and with the price of steel anymore, well, there's two ways we can do it. I'm choosing to sacrifice convenience, or basically ease of fabrication, for maximum retention of still usable material. We're just going to take this piece out right here on the corner, and we're going to have a whole big L-shaped piece left for future projects. It's nice leaving bigger pieces of scraps because you have more options for utilizing them in the future. You can always take a large piece of steel and cut it smaller, but it's hard to make a small piece of steel bigger. You can do it, but it's just best off if you don't have to. I'll just show you real quick. I sketched out on the back of this sheet how I would have done it if this was, 3-4 years ago and steel wasn't ridiculously expensive. So this is our 4x8 sheet, and what I would have done is lopped off this whole end of it up here, so that's a scrap piece for reuse next time. Then I would have cut a slot in right there another one there, third one there, and a fourth one there. So what we do then is clamp what's left down to one of those big steel tables we have and put like a big heavy steel, you know, bar or something for a straight edge over the top. And because we're gonna have like two different angle transitions, like one right there and one right there, what we do is slit those where the transition lines are, and then I could just heat along my bend line, and we'd start by like bending this small corner up, and then we would cut it to sidewall length. Then we'd bend this small corner up, cut it to length. Then we do the same thing here. We do the same thing here. So we're left with the last two wings, and we'd finally bend this one up, cut it, bend this one up, cut it, and then we'd be good. But then we're having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more smaller square pieces of scrap, which I can utilize all that stuff. That's no problem. But small pieces of scrap steel are harder to use for projects than nice, large, intact chunks. So this would have been the easy way to do it, because we're bending 1/4 inch steel. If I would have had these large wings, if you will, to utilize for leverage, yeah, you clamp this thing down, put a bar in there for a straight edge, heat along the line, and you've got a lot to grab onto to bend up. We're not going to have that luxury. So we just need to really keep our wits about us, try really hard not to make any mistakes. We're starting out with only as much material as we need, plus whatever is going to be taken up through the bend radiuses. And if all is, you know, proper, we have a lot of leftover steel we can use for future projects. If we make a mistake, this is a step where we're having to buy another new chunk. So we don't want to have to do that. So it's going to involve, well, more work and more time, not having, you know, lots of excess steel around the edges to use for leverage. But, well, I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve. That who's texting me now? We'll just see. Cody Undergard, you know who you are. Yeah, I've got some tricks up my sleeve to work around some of that, but it's just going to be more work on the front end. So let's get started. So that really wasn't too bad. It took about 15 minutes to cut this chunk out just with the cutoff wheels. Here's where we stand. I took 2 of them right down to almost nothing and then started on a third. That's all right, because I buy these like 20 at a time from the store, so we're sitting good. And if you're wondering, the way I can get these things worn down so far, because at this point they're well smaller than the diameter of the head, this new sheet steel oftentimes is not square. The edges are straight, but the corners are not square. So you can see this little thin strip right here. Yeah, I had to buzz that off of one end to perfectly square things up. So when it comes time to do those edges, and you can take the head of the grinder and hang it out beyond the edge, that's when you can take those used cutoff discs and really run those things down to nothing, get every last drop. So what are we doing here? You can see I've made a lot of marks. We're just going off of the road map here, and this is the back 6-inch section that's going to have to kick up, and then we have a 43.5-inch flat center section, and then we have, let's refresh our memory, 23.5-inch kick up front section. Both of these pieces are going to get cut out. We don't need those at the front, and I left the front about 5 inches long. Plenty of surplus. We're just going to chop whatever we don't need off up here after, but we need to add a curl. That's why we need a lot extra now. But to get the sides bent up, so our blank right now, we're 27.5 inches wide. We're 80 inches long. We need 23 inches inside of wall to inside of wall. So that is the width between those lines. And to bend the edges, each edge is going to have to be 2 inches tall. So it's 2 inches from that line out to the edge on each side. Now this is where, if I would have had the luxury of leaving plenty of surplus out here to trim off later, we'd have had lots of leverage just to heat along that line, bend it up, and you're done. Because we don't have any leverage, we're going to have to use the scoring method. I've done this before. Granted, scoring, well, it weakens the steel along a straight line, gives it a path of least resistance, and then you can bend it up a lot easier. Trouble is, it does weaken it. We will put the strength back in it before we're done. Don't worry about that. But this is the route I chose to go to conserve steel, because steel is blood. Okay, it's ridiculous what we pay for this stuff now. So what I'm going to have to do, you can see this is a 1/4 inch wide. We're just basically going to score out like a fillet groove with a 45-degree edge on each side, about an 1/8 inch deep, halfway through the 1/4 inch sheet. So it's a lot more grinding. I need to get busy. All right, the initial score line has been established on each side. That's the hardest part. And yes, it is to proper 1/8 depth. We've verified that all the way down for consistent bending. If you're nervous about doing that freehand, you can always clamp a piece of steel along here that has a good straight edge, and then just follow that wherever you want your line. I've done this plenty of times, so we don't really need to do that anymore. But now that we have the initial score line made, we'll come in at a 45 from each side, roughly following the other two lines we made for a full 1/4 inch wide fillet. More grinding. Okay, we've relocated to the big metal table, and the relief grooves are both in place. We'll get a little better view of that one there. Yep, they go all the way down both sides, and we have relief notches cut where we have our back 6-inch bend that's going to kick up, and we have the 23.5-inch front area that's going to kick up. So we have relief notches where both of those bends will take place all the way across the face of the pan. And the reason I angled these the way I did, we are straight 90 here, and I put the 25-degree angle right there, and we did another straight right here with the angle out that way, repeated for the other side, is because thinking about the finished product. So the back's going to kick up, the front's going to kick up, but this area here is going to be flat. So this piece is going to come straight up. That means when this is folded straight up, our welds will all be vertical instead of being on an angle. It just looks better when you're done that way. So before we can take the sides and bend them up, we need to look at this front piece here. Now I left this plenty long because we're going to need to have leverage here. We couldn't avoid it. And the reason being, we have this accent at the front where it just starts to arc up a little bit. And we're not going to get any help at all from this one because that's already been torched to oblivion. So we're just going to have to swag it a little bit. Just looking at the illustration, looks like a consistent arc on all of them. And just looking at this old piece of gigantic big pipe, it looks like it would give me about the right radius. So we'll use this to form that. Now, to make sure we get everything nice and straight and square, take a piece of angle iron, because angle iron will self-center on the rounded surface of the pipe. You can then make your reference line all the way across. Now we have a nice squared up line to center the belly pan on. That's going to ensure that when we place that on that pipe, start heating and bending, that this is going to come straight up. It's not going to dive off to one side or the other. There. Oh, get all the stuff off. That was a tough bend. Had to go and shine this up again because, boy, I really put the heat marks on it. Flipped back over now. Well, looking at it from this end, you can see we're a little bit kicked up right there. A little bit of a bobble there. That's all right because most of this is going to get cut off yet. Toward the end there, I just got mad and started pounding it with the sledge. Gave it that little bit extra curls. So yeah, we're probably only keeping that much of that anyhow, so it'll blend. It's not the perfect arc I had in my imagination, but it will suffice. And that was so tough, I decided, you know, we're going to put a couple score marks across where the front's going to kick up and where the back's going to kick up as well. These aren't as pronounced as the ones on the side because we only have to do about 20 degrees. These have to go full 90, so it's just more flushing out and filling after we get everything bent. So we're finally at the stage now. That front took way longer than I thought. We're finally at the stage where we can pull all these side pieces straight 90. See the blue starting. Okay, you notice how I stopped just shy of 90 degrees. Okay, we've got a little bit of space right there, a little bit of rock. That's because when I go back and I fill all that with weld, that is going to pull that in just a little bit. So, because when you throw weld down, that's liquid metal. When metal is hot, it expands. When it cools, it contracts. So you throw liquid hot metal on there, it's all well and good until it cools down. It's going to contract and it's going to start pulling on whatever you've welded it to. That's going to bring that in and probably ended up pretty close to straight 90 if I leave it right there. So now those short ones are the easy ones. I'll get the other side done and then we'll play with these, and then hopefully by then we're all practiced up and we can try those long runs. Don't know how that's going to go yet. Yeah, it turns out that didn't go well at all. It is the next day, and Old Squatch rode the struggle bus for a while yesterday, so I'll just update y'all on what went on. So yeah, doing these 6-inchers is pretty easy. I could keep that. Swagger wants to be on that train. I could keep all that nice and hot, and you know, got it red, fold them right over, good 90s, and it was easy. So we moved up to this first intermediate length, and well, long story short, with the equipment I have, I couldn't keep that hot enough along the full length. I did manage a 90-degree bend, but at the very end I cracked most of it out along there. It didn't completely crack off, but I had to go back and weld it and then flush it out with the grinder. I ended up with the same radius that I had back here anyhow, so not worried about any of that. So I decided, yeah, I'm gonna have to do something drastically different for these longer runs. So you can see I practiced with the first long one last night. What I did was I knew the 6-inch run was no problem, so I slit this one the rest of the way through from each end except for an 8-inch section right there. Heated just that, bent it over, then went back, laid a bead of weld, closed all that up, and that worked excellent. 8-inch run is still enough to keep this square with the world, and then I just tacked each end and then came back and just stitched, welded it just to keep the heat under control, didn't warp anything. So moving forward, that's what we're going to have to do. It's kind of a downer to fail, but if you fail correctly, you can use it as an information gathering experience. You can learn from it. So that's what I did. So, God darn it, it's misting out here again. Anyhow, I went back and I notched this front intermediate piece with an 8-inch run right there. Did the same thing, notched this last long one, 8-inch run. We'll be able to fold those, no problem. Okay, everybody, it is a while later, but we got everything welded and flushed on the exterior, and then I also went and backed up the interior with weld and got those edges flushed too. So we have some pretty good material, unbroken thickness all the way around. So we've restored the strength to the sides. Now it's time to kick the front up and kick the tail up just a little bit. So we're looking for a 20-degree angle on both of those. I'm doing the same method here. I went ahead and just made a slit from there to there. We've got 3 inches of holding material on each side. Did it to the front bend area and the rear bend area. Let's see how it works. Call it right there. Luckily the weight of that was enough just to pull itself over by the time I got my hinges hot. Boy, I'm liking that. Okay, we've got the raw blank. All right, we're just formed. We have a lot of stuff to cut out yet. You can see we need to remove some material to match this one here. It needs a cut out there. It needs stuff taken out at the back. So yeah, that's going to be some there, gouge there, contour there. But that was a lot of work. Okay, that took about 3 days longer than I thought it should have. But we've got our curl at the front. We have all of our proper angles, and I went back and flushed those cross welds. You can see we flattened everything on the inside. We're good on the bottom side there. Good on the bottom side all the way across there. I'm gonna finish these verticals off with the arc welder because they look better that way. That's how they were originally done on that one. The wire feed just doesn't look right, but we did get everything buzzed enough to hold shape. So yeah, hard to believe that thing started out just like this at one time. But yeah, we've got a lot of work left to do. And then once we get all the contours done and the welding finished there, we have drain hole, a couple mounting holes back there, 5 mounting holes across there. We need all that set of oval holes and everything in there. Drain plug hole there. At least one of these is, I think that's for radiator drain, front brackets, cross braces, 4 more holes for a tow hook, and then we're done. That's all we have left, right? So, and how did our side pieces end up moving after we welded? Well, remember we were looking for 23 inside to inside. 23. That means we should be 23 and a half outside to outside. Perfect. Everything came in just nice and square. And yeah, we're just gonna cut it here for now. I'm really dirty and getting kind of tired, borderline cranky, so I think we're gonna call it a night. I'll get this new steel hauled in so it doesn't get rusty, and then we'll hit it hard again tomorrow. The fun is just beginning. Thanks for watching, everybody.